After playing the demo for Trials of Mana, I was totally sold on the game. Now that I've played the full game, I'm pleased to say that it's managed to meet my high expectations and even surpass them in some ways. When you start a new game, there are 6 characters to choose from to be your main character. As I did in the demo, I chose Hawkeye as my primary character and Reese and Charlotte as my 2 secondary characters. The way the game works is that your primary character is the focus, of course, but you get to play out the story of the other party members too. One of the reasons I chose Reese is that she shares the same antagonist as Hawkeye. There are 3 main antagonists, and you get to see more of the antagonist by choosing your party member with the same enemy. The story started out with Hawkeye being forced to flee his town, after being blamed for the death of the prince and his best friend. The witch Belladonna was controlling his friends, and had cursed the princess.
Still alive, I see. Oh. Allow me to fix that.
He travelled to find a way to remove the curse, but after encountering the magical fairy, conveniently named Fairy, he learns that the world is in peril, and he must gather the 8 mana spirits to save the world. As I played the game, I encountered Reese and Charlotte, and had them join Hawkeye on his journey. When you meet the secondary characters, you have the option of watching or playing their backstories. This was a great feature. Playing through the other characters' stories makes them feel more than just other party members.
She's talking in my head. That is the weirdest feeling.
Reese's story was really compelling. She's a princess of a kingdom that's attacked by Hawkeye's people, under the control of Belladonna. Her brother is kidnapped, which sends her on the journey to find him. The game does a great job of reminding you why each character was trying to find their respective villains. When you start learning about all the world-ending events, you forget about Reese's brother or Hawkeye's cursed friend. But then they'll bring it up seamlessly into a conversation and remind you of the original motivations. Speaking of seamlessly, I was also really impressed how Reese's and Charlotte's stories slotted perfectly into the journey. Around 6 hours in, the game took me back to resolve some elements of Reese's story. This was worked in so well and so naturally, but it made me more interested to see how things would have changed if Reese was my main character, or if I had a different set of secondary characters.
I wear my mother's ribbon with pride. May it protect me on my journey.
After playing the demo, I loaded up the re-released version of Trials of Mana on the Switch to see how the story compares. The remake has all the same story beats, and a lot of the dialogue is identical, which will likely please fans of the original. The updated visuals and voice acting, however, do add a lot more emotion and depth, and I found I was super invested in Hawkeye and Reese's stories. Some of the voice acting was a bit over the top, especially Charlotte, but Hawkeye was funny and charming, and Reese came across as strong and determined. It added a huge amount to the game. The story was already really interesting, but the voice acting made it much more compelling. The controls were super easy to get to grips with. You've got the usual jump, dodge, light attack, heavy attack and combos, and you've also got special moves that you can execute. The game starts out very easy, but the difficulty does ramp up through the game. I beat the first few bosses on my first try, but then there was a turning point around 5 hours in, when I died on one of the bosses, and from that point the game did get harder, and even common enemies hit much harder and took a lot more damage to kill. I found that dodging was essential to avoid taking damage. Your team levels up as they kill enemies, and you can unlock new abilities and stat upgrades with training points. When you gain a level, you gain 2 more training points, which you can use to unlock new spells or new stat upgrades. There are also options for character classes. When you get to level 18, you can unlock your first character class, and then the next at level 38. You can choose light and dark paths for each character, that change their skills and attributes and can unlock new magical abilities. Hawkeye and Reese were melee fighters, so I tended to prioritize upgrades to strength and defense, whereas Charlotte was a magic wielder, so I prioritized magic powers. As you find the mana spirits, you can unlock new magical abilities, which become more and more important as the game becomes tougher. As I said, battling was very easy to figure out, and new moves and combos unlock as you change character classes. I found it really easy to execute the combos, and I tended to mix up how I took down enemies. But I would have liked to have seen more reason to use different moves, or to change up my attack style. Most enemies could be taken down by repeating the same combination of attack, and occasionally dodging. It wasn't quite button mashy, but it did feel repetitive. It didn't spoil the game, but when I think about the battle system of a game like Ys 8, it just had more depth and kept me on my toes more so than Trials of Mana. I did like though that you could change which character you control at any time. It became really natural in a battle to execute a special attack with one character, jump to another and cast a spell, and then jump to the next character and execute the next special move, all in a matter of seconds. You have an on-screen map, and at any time it tells you where you need to go. I know this is a small thing, but I really appreciated this. It made it very clear how I can progress the game, but I still had the freedom to explore the area and find enemies and treasure. It's so easy to get lost when playing games with big maps or branching paths. So I think for people that are mostly interested in playing for the story, you'll be able to follow the yellow star and get to the next story scene quite quickly. But for those that like to take their time, there's nothing preventing you doing that, and exploration is rewarded with items. There were items or treasure chests everywhere, so I was constantly running behind every tree or house trying to find any items lying around. There's also a character called Lil Cactus that's hidden around the world. There are 50 to find, and finding them adds some super useful bonuses. It became quite addictive searching for all of them. I was playing on my Switch Lite, and the graphics looked great. The characters, enemies, and environments were detailed and colourful. There was so much variety to the environments. You'll go between forests, desert, ice area, volcano, mountains, and more. I loved seeing the variety of environments, and it's only later in the game you realise just how big the world is. It's a small thing, but I really liked how every town you go to, you can talk to pretty much every person there. The dialogue wasn't always super interesting, but you could learn little bits of information about the world and characters, and it made the game feel like a traditional old-school RPG. Each area you visit was of course populated by enemies, but often you'll encounter the same enemy with just a different colour skin. This also didn't ruin the game, but it just added to the feeling that battles were a bit repetitive. The music was superb. There were a few tracks that I really loved. I wish the game came with a soundtrack disc, as some of the tracks were just brilliant. I mentioned this in my preview video too, but one thing that made me apprehensive of this remake was the Secret of Mana remake that came out in 2018. I was not a fan of that game. It was essentially the same game as the original, but with better graphics. It kept all the old and outdated gameplay systems, and so I just found it clunky and didn't enjoy it. Trials of Mana is a proper remake. It feels like an old school game in terms of story, characters, and the way the game unfolds, but at the same time it feels like a modern game in terms of gameplay and mechanics. The battle system could have used more complexity, but you can always increase the difficulty if you want more challenge. Overall, it's a brilliant game. The story, graphics, music, and the world are a joy to experience, and if you're a fan of action RPGs, I can't recommend this enough. So guys, are you planning to pick up Trials of Mana? And if you played it already, what did you think? Leave a comment below, and as always, thanks for watching.
Sorry about that.